Welcome back to Lit versus Genre, everybody. I am Steve.
And I am Jeff.
That is the Jeff, and we are up to episode 4 of Moon Knight. Everybody,
We are.
a surprising episode. At the same
Sure.
time, maybe not so
Sure.
surprising because I was seeing stuff that
Yeah,
I felt like I had seen from this comic over here. So
absolutely.
I'm glad
Absolutely.
I'm really glad I scolded you last week about not reading the comic so that we can compare and
Yeah.
contrast right here with this.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, though, yeah, so there's so many things. Okay, as usual, I want to say the creation of any art is very challenging. I have nothing but respect for those that put
Nothing but
themselves out there.
respect.
It is hard to do. Right. But of course the but's coming. Any judgments are just, my reactions to what I'm experiencing and, looking to share what I think other people's reactions might be. So it's funny because for this week, I read the chapters of the comic first, and I'm not saying we need to, dive fully into the comic by any stretch, but it was bumpy, I'll say.
Yeah.
I'm on record as saying that I really did like the first couple issues of, I was going to say episodes, first couple issues of this other Moon Knight series we were reading. The first one that we read, like I said, I had some good visuals, but that was sort of it for me. This other one I thought was doing some interesting things with kind of like, the mental hospital, mental health, that kind of idea. But then it just kind of goes off the rails. And the only reason I mention that is because I think we'll talk about the comic kind of after the episode. But I felt a lot of that in this episode, like you're saying, which was good in a way that I was like, oh, I see where they're getting this. It's just for me, some of the elements that they chose to use, I thought were the weaker parts of the story
Hmm.
in a way, not just the hospital setting, but how we kind of get there. Um, and so before I get into big spoilers, because weren't we trying to do non-spoiler ones? Did we get rid of that
And I
already?
hated that so much
Yeah. Okay.
that
Okay.
it's gone.
So, but anyway, I was just gonna say that the issues of Moon Knight got pretty bumpy, and this episode I thought was rather bumpy as well. I enjoyed it more than the last episode, though, I will say, episode 4, primarily because we got back to the character I love, Steven, right, and his interactions with Mark, and that is just a joy to me to watch. The actor does such an incredible job with that duality in character and especially with the continued love triangle, like you were talking about,
Right.
Steve. I thoroughly enjoyed all of that, and I hadn't been fully sold on the love interest, but I thought the actress, and I don't know either of the actress names. I thought the actress did an incredibly good job in the scene with the kiss. Where she was
Hmm.
going to kiss him, and then he reveals some information, and then he ends up kissing her. Like the way she took his kiss and everything, I was really into her in this one. I thought she did an incredible job with her body language and positioning, and I was getting so many emotions from her. It was awesome. So I thought that sort of earlier part of the episode was really, really fun with
I
Mark inside Steven punching him, just all that. But go ahead.
Yeah,
Go
let
ahead.
me just say
Yeah,
I
please.
like that decision point there for
Hmm.
Steven because she was going in
Yeah.
for the kiss, which you know he wants,
Yes.
and then he pulls
Yes.
back and feels like I have to tell you this
Hmm.
piece of information, which I kind of really
Right.
liked from a character standpoint for Steven.
Oh, dude, I'm all about the honor choices and stuff like that. So yeah, no, completely, completely. And then how cute it is when he's like, ooh, she's like, "That's so you," and he's like, "Being honestly" or something, and she's like, "Yes, being honestly," instead of like honest. And it was just this really sweet moment between them. So I thoroughly enjoyed that. I also did enjoy what they continue to do with like Egyptian history and stuff like that, because as I said before, I always find that stuff really intriguing. I thought it was funny that Ushabti is a real word, and you might go like, why is that funny? It's because for those who know about Games Workshop and the game Warhammer, there is an army called Tomb Knights, who I played because I like Egyptian stuff, and one of their coolest units were called Ushabti. And they were like these,
Ah.
well, they weren't tiny. And again, well, I guess they were because they're miniatures, but they were meant to represent these huge, like stone things carved like jackals and eagles and stuff like that. And so it's funny. I was like, oh, Shopti. So I just enjoyed that in some small ways. I know they're not being true in every sense of it, but I felt like I was learning some. And I enjoy that. I know there's a lot of people out there who like watching or reading, murder mysteries and that type of thing. I say this because David Baldacci, a big murder mystery writer, talks about this, about injecting like real information. Dan Brown does this as well. And I think there's a lot of readers out there that like that feel like, oh, I'm getting this fun adrenaline
Mm.
story and I'm actually learning something, which is kind of neat. And so I think there's a small taste of that here, like when they were doing Horse's Eye and like where the senses were and things like that. I don't know how much of that was real, but I like to think it is. And I thought it was really cool. So I like that aspect as well. And then how that ties to Steven's character, right? Like that's why we need Steven,
Mhm.
because he knows about this stuff. He's an expert in that stuff. And I love how that, is married together.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
agree with all of that,
Okay.
and I think the funny thing about this episode, I think it's funny that you compared it
Mhm.
to the previous episode because like
Mhm.
in the
Mhm.
previous episode, the plotty plot stuff wasn't bothering me. I wasn't put
Right.
off by any
What
conveniences
about
or
in this one, Steve?
like in this one I was like okay, in this one I
Ah!
don't know what's going on
Oh
like
my goodness. The rest of
so
it was just a shit show.
but
Is that what I liked? The
well,
rest of
here's the thing though. Here's the thing
Oh
that
my
then I
goodness.
found the twist. Okay, so
Uh,
let's go into spoilers because
Do
my
it.
point
Do
kind
it.
of brings us over into spoilers.
Sure.
Um, so a lot of
Mhm.
stuff didn't make sense as we're going into this
Makes
tomb,
sense.
right? Like they roll up
Sure.
on it, nobody's
Mhm.
there. And
Nobody's
then I
there.
was like, okay, this will maybe make sense if they're all dead somehow or something. And
Right,
then
right. But otherwise,
they
there's always
pan to
someone in the
that.
camp.
Right,
Right.
or there would be somebody in the camp, and they pan to a clue of that. But even at the
Sure.
same time, I was still like, wouldn't you be like, what the frick?
Yeah.
Where is everybody? Like,
Exactly.
they really wouldn't leave anybody back in the camp. Everybody
You
would go
always leave
inside.
somebody.
Right,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
at least the characters would be questioning this, and then like I
Mhm.
could buy it if the characters are questioning it.
And that, let's just say, because we are writing podcasts, I think that's an important moment. You can do some really silly, weird crap in stories, right? Like
Mm,
basically, there's no limit, right? You just need your characters to act realistically, right? So is it realistic that a camp of that size would be left unattended? In no way, shape,
right,
or form. But you can do it as long as the characters are like, this is really weird. And that actually adds to your tension. That adds to
right.
the feeling you're already trying to push for these characters, right? But
But I
please go
guess
ahead.
the other point I want to make about this is
Mhm.
I don't retroactively explaining things, which we kind of talked about with Wheel of Time,
Okay.
does
We
not
did.
do it for me because I don't want to feel
Sure.
like your story is stupid for like 30 minutes until then I
Oh, yeah.
find out, oh, okay, this is what was really
Yeah.
going on. Maybe
Right.
some people dig that. Maybe some people
True.
dig look at it, watching something going, this is messed up.
Yeah.
And then you explain at the end, oh, all is forgiven. Yeah, oh, you got me or something cool. But
Right.
like, that does not
It's
work
hard.
for
I
me.
think it's hard to do well. I really do think it's hard to do well.
I
I think
don't
it
know.
can be done, but I think it's
Can you
really
give me
hard.
an
I think
example?
I was just saying, I think in most cases it face plants, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
There was, I was actually, so I made a little thing for myself because I knew I was going to come in and complain about this, right? And I was like, okay, anytime that I'm going to come in and be like, bleh, do whatever I watched, I want to give something that I think is really fun, or good, And so it's going to sound really funny. This wasn't the one that I was planning on talking about, but because you're asking about this specific question, I'm gonna look it up. So it's this anime that I started watching, and then my wife just started watching as well. And it's about like love triangles and everything. Not love triangles, like love quadriangles and everything. It's amazing. It's called My Next Life as a Villainess: All Routes Lead to Doom. It's amazing.
Okay.
It's incredible.
Wait, what is
It's
this? A book?
no, so it's an anime.
It's an
It's an
anime.
anime.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to do this as quickly as I
All
can.
right, all right.
So there's this anime where the new big trend in anime, it's huge right now, is isekai, which is basically you die and then you wake up in another world, a fantasy world usually. Maybe the world is a game you used to play. And so this girl wakes up in this game she used to play, and the game she was playing is a whole subgenre of video games I didn't even know exist, and they're relationship games where you're a character and then you're trying to like be with certain other characters and it's all about the relationship dynamics. There's a whole name for it. It's like called otame. But anyway, the point I'm trying to
Dig
get
it.
at is that she gets stuck in this game and she is playing the villainous character, but she doesn't want to be the villain character. And so there's this boy that becomes her brother that's acting a particular way, and we don't quite understand why he's acting that way. But
Mm.
because he's a side character, it's kind of not that big a deal. And then we
Uh-huh.
get a very quick snippet of something that happened in his past, like right then, to explain why he's behaving in that way right in that moment. And that was a time I literally, I know this was a long explanation to get to it, but I literally thought about our previous conversations about
Mm.
said thing. And I was like, oh, I don't mind this here, right? And I didn't break it down too much. I just thought about how it related to what we've discussed about,
But
explaining something after the fact. And I'm wondering if it's because it's a side character that it's
well, how
happening
long did you
to.
have to
You know,
wait to get that
not long.
explanation?
Only
Yeah.
moments.
I
Only
I
moments,
think
right?
that's
Yeah.
fine. Like you
Yeah.
like leave me in a state of doubt for it's
Right.
suspending that
Mhm.
where you're gonna break suspension of disbelief, and the
Sure.
gambit you're doing, I think, is how
Mhm.
long can
Right.
you
Right. I
do
would agree.
that before
Hmm.
you lose somebody? And if you just do it
Hmm.
like the next scene or later in the same
Sure.
scene, yeah, I think I could, if I thought about it long enough, come up
Yeah.
with some
Is
pleasing
I think
examples
it's
of
fair.
that.
Because then I'm thinking about Tom Maryland, right? Because that's like our big example of,
Mm,
and I think the issue there was again a time one, as we're saying
yeah.
right here. If Tom Maryland had revealed that about himself earlier, right,
Mm,
and not moments before he
he's
goes
about
up
to
against
die.
a fade or whatever, it's timing, right? So much of it
Yeah.
is timing, that explanation, and we could say that for the whole gambit, right? Because as we've said, it's usually better if you can time it before the event would even be close to taking place, right?
Hmm.
Like the further, because then it feels like a setup, as
Right.
opposed to it happens and then we get the explanation after. Can feel like, well, couldn't have I had this sooner? But I think again, as long as it's happening quickly, it's better at least. So
So
anyway,
yeah, just to go back through a litany of things that don't make
sure.
sense. That was the first
Oh my
thing
God, there's so many.
with the camp that makes
Go
sense.
for it.
Then they're
Sure.
like wandering around in
Right.
this tomb. They're
Mhm.
being pretty brazen. Also, I feel like they weren't like particularly worried about being sneaky or
Mhm.
that there
Mhm.
are dozens of armed dudes somewhere in here.
Mhm.
They hear even gunfire going off at some
Right.
point.
Right.
Their path, though, is not intersecting
No,
with
of course
any
not.
of these bad guys' paths who
No.
are shooting
No.
at like a zombie who
No.
then
Because it's a
appears.
maze, but
Because
it's got a real long squiggly line that's straight.
I know,
But it's a maze.
yeah, like if the maze was more complicated and Steven
Right.
knew some better information how they could like
Yes.
sidestep everybody, then great. Like I would be
Yeah, that'd
with
be
it, but
nice.
they don't really sell that or,
Nope.
make you understand that.
They
Um,
don't.
all
They
right,
don't.
so that sucked. Then
They needed
like
a clever explanation. I just want to pause there for a moment
yeah.
because I think you've really hit on something. Like they were on the edge of it, right? With, oh, yeah, it's cool this idea that the maze is a symbol that I think most people have seen in their lives, which is also pretty neat that like Egyptian culture has stuck with us so long, right? There is this fascination associated with it. So I think most people have seen the Eye of Horus at some point in their life,
Mhm.
right? And so it's cool they can draw on something that's known but not known that exists in our society and
Right.
say, oh, here, let me give you some more information about that. I thought all those beats and decisions were really smart.
Mhm.
I think they just, as you're saying, that doesn't explain why they're not running into apparently all these other people that are from this
Right.
other group that have been there much longer than them, so on and so forth, right? So I felt like it was a trade for them. They're like, I want this really cool Eye of Horus moment explanation, but then it undercuts the next. Yeah,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
totally. Like agree.
Mhm.
And then like Ethan Hawke kind of shows up and like, he's limping along and you're like, dude,
Yes.
what the hell? How are you
What
getting past
are
these
you doing
mummy
here?
protector dudes, right? And he
Right,
shows up
right.
just to like have a talk with Layla to reveal
Just
a
just to have a
crucial piece
talk.
of information
Nobody's in a
that'll come up
hurry.
later. Okay,
Nobody's worried about the five other
I
priest
know,
things that are
we're
running
just chilling
around.
out.
We're just talking
And there are
about
a bunch of
stuff.
other people with dudes. And
Yeah.
where are they? They show up later. Okay, I
Who
want to
knows?
get through this quick though, because like
Sure, sure. Go for it. Go for it.
I also was like, I gotta look up, is Alexander the Great's tomb like unknown? I was actually even really
That was
surprised about that because I was like,
that was
that was like the
fun.
most famous dude in
Yeah.
history. Really, nobody know. Is that true? Down
I
below in the
don't know,
comments,
but I mean that
any
it feels like
Alexander the
that.
Great scholars can
I
tell
know,
us.
right? Let us know. I mean, I could Google it, but where's the fun in that when we
Well, I
have
listened. The
comment
funny
section, right?
thing is, I listened to an audiobook not long ago about Philip of Macedonia and Alexander. It was kind of like a dual
Oh, interesting.
biography
Okay.
audiobook, and
Mhm.
I know the circumstances around Andrew the Great,
What's
Alexander the Great's death, but I never really heard anything about like, oh, nobody knows where his
it's
tomb was.
what I know is that Alexander did have great respect for Egypt, and I know that because I was learning about Napoleon, and Napoleon was modeling himself after Alexander the
Mm,
Great, and so he did a huge thing to Egypt, and that's actually why we have so much information about Egypt was because of this massive
mm,
expedition
mm.
that Napoleon did to
Yeah.
Egypt. So I know there is a connection between
Oh yeah,
Alexander and
Alexandria
Egypt for
is in
sure.
Egypt.
Yeah,
It's literally
right,
is in Egypt.
right, exactly.
But
So
like,
it was
so
cool. It was a cool
anyway,
choice. I
yeah,
was
no, I like bringing
hoping.
it in. I thought it
I
was,
was hoping we were going to get an Alexander the Great character,
yeah,
honestly.
that'd
For
be
for a
funny.
moment I was like, "Oh yeah, let's resurrect somehow whatever Amit and it be Alexander the Great." Like I got hype. For a moment there I was like, "Oh, oh." And then it was just of
I
course,
did like the
she was
joke
there.
though
I
of him
like I
having
like
to
the joke.
reach
Don't
down.
get me wrong.
Yeah.
I was a little sad that seems like, we're not going to get Alexander the Great, but I thought the joke was funny, for sure.
Okay, so anyway, I'm not
Yeah,
buying like most of this episode. I mean, the
sure.
jokes are still landing pretty well. Yet,
Yeah.
like you said, I care about the love
Mm,
triangle.
yeah.
So there are things that are like are okay about this, but I was
Mhm.
like, this episode's pretty whack.
Right.
Then they do the big. Is it even a twist? It's just like
Yeah.
they Mark gets
Who
shot.
knows?
He goes into a pool, and then
It's
they
just
basically
random.
do this comic right here,
Yeah.
where he's
Yeah.
in an insane asylum,
Yep.
and
Mhm.
there's a little Moon Knight action figure that he
Yeah.
sees. But here's the thing: when all this was happening, and when he was talking to
Mhm.
Ethan Hawke in the insane asylum, I was
Mhm.
like, oh, now all these plot holes that I've just been watching. Kind of one of my big complaints about this comic is I
Oh,
could not believe the insane asylum world. Like the insane
right.
asylum world in this comic, I was like, it has not done enough for me to really buy it and to really
Sure.
feel that tension of,
Right.
oh, maybe the stuff that I've been seeing before is BS. Now,
Mm.
in this episode though, I was like, what I just watched was so whack that like I was like, oh, maybe I am
Right.
buying a little bit more of this insane asylum world, that this is happening in his head and this is the bad story that he's
Right.
told himself in his head now at this point. And in a way that
I
made me
guess.
like the insane asylum bit in this episode
Okay.
more than I
Right.
like it in this comic. But we'll get more into this comic because I think it kind of
Yeah,
takes some other stuff from this comic as well. That's kind of interesting.
it did. So yeah, for me, like, it's funny. I didn't take it as, and now he was waking up into his real world, right?
Mm,
But that does make perfect sense. Like that I mean, I now that you say it, I'm like, oh yeah, you could just see it in that way that, he was having a dream or an episode or whatever, and then he woke up and we found out where he really is, right?
right.
And all these people and characters that he's interacted with, or at least some of them,
Mm-hmm.
are around him and that
Because
sort of thing. And
Layla's there, and
Layla's there,
the
Ethan Harrow, Ethan
psychiatrist
Hawke is
wears
there.
Crocs. I thought all the little
Right.
things were pretty
Yeah.
funny and cute
I
that they
I
put
did
on.
enjoy them. I did. It
Oh,
just
and
felt
starting with
so.
the letterbox or the 4:3
I
ratio,
loved
like
it.
cutting right to
Yeah,
that was also, I
90s.
mean, pretty fun because you're like, what
Listen,
in the name of God?
I enjoyed that because I
Yeah.
literally, because Sky and I were watching, I was like, oh, he's watching a 90s movie now or something, you know what I mean? Or like 80s. So, I will agree that that was all cute. I guess for some reason it would just seem so wild to me if they decided to, because isn't this only a 6 episode show, right?
Yeah. So they got two
For them,
more.
again, I think it's a time thing, right? Like if this had happened in the middle of episode 1 or whatever, I would go, oh, I guess he's just been insane as But if more than half of your like show has not been, like my brain can't compute that. It like Brett
Mm.
Meredith's like, no, this is just some weird like trap Larry, like weird prison the thing that he's in, or like it's just now this is the dream or something like that. Like my mind can't even comprehend the idea that everything I just watched was a setup for this. That
Mm.
would seem like crazy storytelling to me,
No.
which is maybe the point because he's in an
Yeah.
insane asylum, right? So I mean that would be really bold if it was. But I think that's why it was tough for me to read this scene in that way. To me, it just felt like they had written themselves into a corner and they didn't know what to do, and he got shot, and now he's in an insane asylum because they're like, we got to bring some of the comic in here. And I'm like, what am I watching? I do like the idea of seeing two marks, though. That was totally fun. I like that they showcased the third one that's like
Mm.
hidden, right, that we don't
Yeah,
get to
yeah,
see. And then the hippo creature thing at the end. Like, I listen, I am all about seeing
yeah. Yeah.
crazy Egyptian gods like happening. Please, all day. Give me everyone you've got. So it was great. Sky was like, no. And when the episode ended, right, I'm seeing the hippo. She's just like, that was the best part of this whole episode, right? You're ending now. So, there were moments that I enjoyed, but it also definitely feels like the show is going off the rails, especially where any sort of through line and plot is considered. Ethan Hawke continues to kill it. I loved it. His everything he said while as the psychiatrist, I thought was amazing. I'm like, Ethan
Mm.
Hawke, you're just amazing. Like I was not excited to see him initially, but he has just crushed his role, despite how silly the scenes are. They give him sometimes. I feel like he's just done an amazing job throughout. So,
Yeah, I think that in part, I mean, saved the episode for me, and I
okay,
guess I
yeah.
am still kind of wondering. I mean, I guess the most plausible thing is that I was supposed to take the first half of this episode seriously.
Mm.
Although,
I think you were supposed to.
I think so, but although
Yeah.
we are picking up from Mark getting knocked out after Khonshu changed the sky. But we do see
Yeah.
her, and Mark's. Is he unconscious during that whole beginning scene where she's running from the truck and
No,
she
he
doesn't.
that scene was also just ridiculous.
Well,
But yeah,
exactly.
that I was you're like Jeff, all the bad writing was.
I'm just saying. I think
I
this.
mean,
I do think this
so
show
I get what
is
you're
out
saying.
to mess with us on purpose. Like I think, like
Sure.
it
I mean,
the.
that'd be
I
cool.
think like the scene of Mark drunk in Egypt at the end of season episode
Hmm,
2 might have been the third character and not actually Mark.
maybe.
I think there probably if we went back and went over things with a fine tooth comb,
Hmm.
like other like little things
Easter
where
eggs
some
would be
Easter
there.
eggs where something's messing with us. I
I'd
felt like
want that to be true if
the
so.
last
Yeah, sure.
episode, I kind of watched back over it. I mean, I think some of the plotting stuff I was not happy with, but I didn't think it was like plain ridiculous. Like I didn't have any part where a
I
character was doing something that I was like, I don't know why they're doing this, or that
Well, I
I
mean, I
wouldn't
don't
buy
know
it.
why she wanted to know about her dad like right away. Like, I mean, I get that she wants to know right
No,
now.
in
She
this
wants to yell at him.
episode.
Yeah, yeah, okay, okay,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure. Oh,
yeah.
you're saying the
So
episode
in
prior.
in
Got it, got it.
episode 3, I didn't feel like I
Gotcha.
I get like going on the side quest and this extra MacGuffin and all this was like
Right.
kind of cheese and like and
Yeah.
I'm on board with that, but it wasn't to the point where I was like this feels like it's miswritten entirely.
So wait,
Whereas
is your thesis that
my thesis, maybe the
is
whole
this
first
just
half of
this
this,
episode?
yeah, because
Hmm.
unless I guess they can do like a resurrection thing, but this would also solve the him getting shot point that we have
Right.
to write ourselves out of later. Might be totally wrong about this, but maybe like this from this point on was
Right.
all part of the story in his head after he gets knocked out after
I mean,
moving the sky in the previous thing, right?
but but that would still be weird because it feels like they got to do like listen, I love your way you're viewing this show because you keep finding ways it could be like written better. I love it. I love it. It's great.
Well,
No, please keep
no,
doing it.
no. My argument is
But
not that this is better because my argument is I do not like
no,
this gambit. I do
no,
not
no, no.
like the gambit of oh
Sure,
this
sure.
seems really dumb until next
Right.
episode where we explain it all. I dislike it, but
All
it just
right.
occurred to me that maybe that is what they are doing here.
I
Um,
don't think that's what I mean. I like that you're finding a way I meant that you're finding a way to make what we watch better more than like
Again, I
the
don't think
show
that
was
would be
better or
better.
something.
I think that would be bad as well. I think it
Right.
would be equally as bad, but I'm just like kind of
Right.
interested in, if
Yeah.
that's what they're trying to do here.
To me, it feels like it's got to be all or nothing because you've got Ethan Hawke as the psychiatrist. He's either a psychiatrist or he's this bad hero character who's trying to resurrect Amit. Like, so I don't know how he could
No, I don't think you're
be
following me. I'm
both,
saying the only time it cuts off, like
right?
like episodes 1, 2, and 3 are real.
Okay.
Mark gets knocked out by moving the sky. Not Mark, Steven,
Okay.
whoever. Oh my God,
Right,
now I'm
right.
doing it.
Sure.
Uh,
Whatever.
so then from that point,
He's in an
he's
insane asylum.
so yeah, he's in an insane asylum, but he in his mind, well, he's not
That
ever
Hera runs
also
in
ever
his.
really in an insane asylum. I think both of those are fake. I think everything that we saw in this episode is fake. Where we will pick
Okay.
up is not from where he gets out of the pool after being shot or something. Where we pick
Okay.
up is back on the sand, from where he passed out
Okay.
after that's this is my thesis, and I just want to put it out there while
Go for it.
taking no
Go for
credit
it.
for it, because if it
Do
really
it.
happens, I'm gonna
Do it.
like brag the shit out of it.
Just do it. They're cutting back to the hippo person. That's what's gonna
Well,
happen.
yeah, we're
But
definitely gonna get more hippo person for
okay,
sure. I
okay.
mean, there's no doubt about that. You
They can't
got
set that up and then not
no, no,
deliver.
no,
I mean,
no.
it's so funny to say that sentence, right? They showed us a hippo person. That is a promise.
That is a
They have to
promise.
show us more of the
A
hippo
promise you
person, right?
made to the
But it's
viewer.
true. Like I think we can both make that prediction to be 100%
Yeah,
correct
yeah,
because that's
yeah.
the way it works,
Positive
right?
about that.
That's just so funny to me that's the truth of storytelling, but it is. Yeah, I don't. I love that you've got this theory. I don't think so. I think it's just bad writing in this episode, and I think they just needed a reason for the characters to linger, and so that they could then get caught by the bad guy and all that ridiculousness, and then he'll somehow be okay even though he was shot or whatever, because the third personality will come out and something. I don't know, but yeah. So I would be interested to hear before we get into the comic, obviously, how people are liking the show. I think overall for me, the show started really strong, and I think it's you fighting to get back to that early awesomeness. I would say there were scenes of that in this episode, but it's also kind of going off the rails, and I hope they can do that in an effective and satisfying way. But obviously, time will tell with these last couple episodes.
Yeah, I was about to say going off the rails
Yeah,
is not bad. I would rather go off
it's
the
not.
rails than like be
It's
boring,
not
right? And I
sure.
definitely still cannot say that the show is boring. I was like, oh, we're doing
Right.
this now. Oh,
Yep.
now this.
Yep.
And the other thing I'm
Hmm.
gonna say, let's transition into the comic.
I just want to agree that I think overall people are enjoying this show and are still enjoying this show because it's not boring. So yeah,
Yeah,
no, I
yeah.
would agree with that. Yeah,
Yeah, and again, moving like really fast and
it
taking
is
big swings
really
and
fast.
doing
Yeah.
crazy stuff
Mhm.
for only 6 episodes.
Yeah. Yeah.
But one thing, the other point that I want to bring up about this insane
Mhm.
asylum is I feel
Sure.
like the length of time we're lingering on things in this insane asylum
Hmm.
is a lot better here. Than in this
Mm,
comic. So this comic, if y'all have
right.
not read this comic before, this
Yeah.
comic,
Let's talk about the graphic.
it yeah. So this comic,
Ooh, okay.
well, so we're actually up to issue 3 because we talked about 1 and 2, and if you want to go
Right.
back to
Hmm.
the second episode of Moon Knight video that we
Yep.
have, it's in you can go to our channel. Maybe I'll link it below. Yeah, in the comments, not on
Yep.
screen. I
Sure.
don't know how to do that yet, yo.
Yeah.
I'm not that good a YouTuber yet.
We're
Um,
working our way up.
but the whole thing kind of starts in the insane asylum in
Right.
this comic. Very
Hmm.
similar type setup. There's a main psychiatrist
Yep.
that Ethan Hawke takes over here. Another thing
Right.
I appreciated about the show is that the orderlies did not seem like such a parody. Like they seemed like real people who were like, "Ow, you hit me. This
No,
sucks. I hate my
that was
job."
that was my favorite part of the end when Ethan Hawke is like, "Are you okay?" And the one guy was like, "I'm okay." Like that's me. That was the best part of the
Yeah,
insane
that was
asylum
very
scene.
real, right?
Except for the hippo, of course, at the end.
Right.
But overall, yeah, like that was real. Like that was a cool moment. But anyway, go ahead.
But the thing about this comic is they really stretch this concept for a
They
really
do.
long time. So we
They
escape
do.
into the subway. We see the psychiatrist
Right.
here
Hmm.
is really
Hmm.
Amit. So it's kind of still going
Right.
like same villain position, kind of
It
there for the
is. Yeah, yeah,
psychologist.
yeah. Hmm.
Um, and this just like for me in the comic just gets tiring because like you don't have
Yeah.
anything to care about. Like the kind of trappings of
It's
the
just,
main
yeah.
Moon Knight story in the show of like Mark and
Mhm.
his wife and Mark and Steven's conflict and the love
Yeah.
triangle and all
We're
those things.
grounded in that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
give me something to care about, or even like Khonshu and him being an asshole
Yeah.
and
A little
like
bit. Yeah. Sure.
not being able to express himself well. Gives me things that
Right.
I care about on an emotional level. Whereas this comic never gives me a moment to give
Yeah.
a shit on an emotional level because it's all just head gamey stuff the whole
Yeah,
time.
they try to with Crawley for sure.
Oh yeah, because he kind of gives
With
up
his
his
like
soul.
sacrifice,
But it's
right?
so vague,
But
I don't
it's
even know what it means. Like, I don't know if
yeah,
any of these people are
it's too
real.
vague, and especially because he comes back right away. Well, and it's also weird because Anubis is also helping people travel at night, which I thought was Khonshu's
Mm,
thing. So I'm like, wait, we got like an overlap. Who takes care of late night travelers? Anubis just requires more payment than Khonshu apparently.
mm,
But anyway, so yeah, no, I can agree with what you're saying. Even as basic as in the show, I just want Steven to be able to go work in the gift shop. You know what I mean? Like I just want this guy to
right,
have a
right.
regular
You
day.
care.
I care about that deeply. Whereas, yeah, in the comic, like it was going in a way that I thought it had something. Like I thought it had a cool concept. But then yeah, I would say it sort of implodes in later issues, unfortunately. And I think part of it is exactly what you're saying. We're never grounded long enough in
Hmm.
something that we know is real or a relationship we know is real, to care about them or to care about the loss of them or the continuation of them,
Right.
that sort of stuff.
And I
Right.
thought again about like the other like
Yeah.
big head trippy thing that we talked about. I think when we
Mhm.
talked about these comics in the second Moon Knight episode, uh, about a Total Recall and thinking again about like when Total
Oh,
Recall is trying to do head trip
so
stuff for
good.
you, they don't extend it out that long. I mean, really, the
Mm,
main scene is when they
yeah.
get catch back up with them on Mars with Sharon Stone, and they try
Sure.
to convince him he's really sitting in a chair back in
Yeah.
Recall and all
Oh,
that. And
such a great
it's
scene.
such a baller scene. It's
Such an
great.
amazing
It's
scene.
probably
That
the
actor does such an incredible job
yeah,
with that
right.
role. Like the guy with the glasses, you know who I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about, who's like,
Yeah,
this is just
the
a,
guy's like the
feverish.
psychologist or whatever.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
it's the
Talk about a
highlight of that
movie.
movie. I think it's probably the best
Oh,
scene
it's
in the
one
movie.
of.
But it's awesome. I
There's
mean,
so
there's
many
a lot that I
classics.
love in it, but I think
Yeah.
that's kind of like what was my
Mhm.
favorite thing in the movie when I first saw it. And
Right.
like, but it's not that long because I don't think you
Mm.
can build your whole thing around that. Even like Philip K. Dick, which is
I'd
just
agree.
kind of head tripping most of the time.
Mhm.
I actually haven't read his novels, but I don't get the sense that Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is really all about the head trip. These head trip things that they then made into big
Yeah.
movies were short stories. We're like, yeah, you can sit around and get the rug pulled out under you at the end
Mhm.
of a short story and it's fine. You're not going to be mad. You haven't like sat there
It's not
that
the same
long with the thing.
investment. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so in this show, I liked the amount of time that I was led to sit there going, well, yeah, the rest of this episode, there were some pretty big plot holes, and maybe this is just a story in his head. And like,
Right.
I like how they sold it with all the details of all the objects, and
They
like
definitely had all the
Ethan Hawke
details.
does, like you
Yeah.
said, a great kind of monologue there.
So
Um,
good.
and then when they break, then they just kind of break it right away, and I'm like, cool, awesome. I like, I don't want to spend that much time in that concept. The way this
Sure.
comic has spent, like
It
now we're up
lingers.
to issue
Yeah.
6. So we've kind of spent 6 issues in sort of the same concept. At the end of issue
Yeah.
5,
Yeah.
it does a big, or in issue 5 itself, does a big
Yeah.
switch to the
Right.
core concept, which I like and I want to talk about.
Oh, I
But
hate it so much. But yeah, no, let's talk about it. Well, first, I just want to say there are some of the best covers. Well, not the
mm,
best covers because I haven't seen that many covers, but some covers I really like.
yeah, they're
If for
cool.
nothing else, I would say looking at the cover of issue 4
Yeah.
is really beautiful with them kissing and the sand blowing away. And I
Mm-hmm.
also thought issue 5 was kind of neat with the nature of the mask, and
Mm-hmm.
how he's pulling it off.
Mm.
So
The
before we get
negative
into
space of that or whatever.
yeah, exactly. And well, and that he's pulling off the face like of man's face to be Moon Knight underneath. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is really neat. But what I want to talk with you about was artists changing, because this really threw me. So yeah, so we've got this one artist for the first four issues, and then that same artist is in issue five. But issue five is when things start to get real trippy and weird,
I mean, it's
where
been
he's like
pretty
in
trippy and weird.
yeah, like he's in space. No, wait, he's like a movie producer. No, wait. And I see now that that's because they were bringing in all these other new artists. So the original artist did like the beginning and end of it, or well, not the very, very end, but like did the scenes that were in the world we were used to, which is New York being taken over by like a sandstorm, pyramids and stuff. And then all the other weird scenes are by these other artists. And then after
Hmm.
that, we just have the other artists. We don't have the original artist anymore. And to me, the art just goes way down. Do you find that happens a lot in comics where the artists change? I imagine it has to, but like this many new artists, because there were three new ones, and how that seems to even affect the nature of how the story is told. Is that common or?
Yeah, so a few things with comics. Definitely the artist, at the very least, it should, if the comic is working well, being affecting
Mm,
how the comic is told.
right.
Because like the artist is a co-creator in every comic. It's a visual
Mm,
medium. There
okay,
is
yeah.
no just like I mean, I think people like Alan Moore are famous for really massively over explaining their what they want in each
Mm,
panel
mm,
and writing, full
okay.
pages to describe what has to go in a panel. But even at times like that, he doesn't really have like a reputation for artists not wanting to work with him or feeling like they were like
Mm,
super constrained by him. So
okay.
I feel like, the best artists are the best writers are going to change their story or write things in a certain way based on what they kind of know that
Mm,
artist does or what that artist likes to do
okay.
or their strong points or things like that. And you kind of hope for that, honestly, because then you get
Mm,
that synthesis that you really, really want. Um,
mm,
and also then because of that, comics is a medium that, this is fallen off a bit more in the modern
mm,
times, but it should be coming out once a month or sometimes twice a month. It should be coming out regularly.
okay.
Certainly more
Right.
back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, the companies would hew more to that they would have fill-ins or maybe even have whole kind of fill-in stories or something if they were
Mm,
getting
okay.
behind, if somebody was not going to make a deadline. And kind of in that way it feels similar to television. It has that like charm to me that television sometimes has where like
Mm,
an actor wants to leave the
yeah,
show,
like Downton
right?
Abbey,
So
yeah.
then they're like,
Mm,
okay, well, we now have to come up with some way to write you out of this because what it
yeah.
really was is a contract dispute, or what it really was is a
Mm,
scheduling thing, or something like that, because you have this
yeah.
ongoing thing, and that can obviously lead to some like decisions that aren't great
Mm,
narratively, but then when you kind
sure.
of think about the medium and how it works, it's pretty adorable. So
It's got
this
this
to
sort of like
me,
lived in the moment feel. Just to talk about that super quick. I think you're right. I think there is something about capturing that. I think that's why a lot of people are enjoying serial reading that's happening on free sites like Royal Road,
mm,
where a chapter is released like every day or twice a week. Because you're getting to see that story as it's being made. And I would agree, having, read some of those recently, there is something cool about feeling like you're there as it's happening in the moment. So anyway,
right.
go ahead.
So what happens in this comic, and
Mm,
I don't know. I probably should have. I don't even
mm,
know if this is documented everywhere. Like how much of
mm,
this was something Jeff Lemire wanted to do, or an
right.
idea he kind of concocted when he
It feels
realized
concocted.
that the artist was leaving. Well, it does to a
Right.
certain point, but I
Yeah.
think he might have come up with a plan for when this author was leaving. I don't know if
Mm,
his plan was necessarily let's get three new guys on this
right.
as artists. That might have been
Sure.
more like, well, you have three personalities. Like I could see Jeff Lemire sitting there going, what
Yeah.
do I want to do with this? Oh,
Yeah.
why don't we do this? Get
Right.
a different artist with a starkly different sensibility for each of
Mm.
the three personalities. And that feels very like intentional to me. That
I
doesn't
like
feel
that
like a
idea.
mistake
I like that idea.
or
You're
working
right.
with what
You're
you
right.
have. It felt
Hmm.
like this
Hmm.
was like, oh, this artist is going to bow out. I'm gonna get a new artist. Let's do
Mm,
something kind of fun, and we can even ease
yeah.
into it in a kind of cool
Conceptually,
way.
I'm with you. Like that to me on paper, so it sounds funny, but on paper it sounds like a great idea, right? Like we've got three different personalities. We're gonna rock with three different artists. I will say though, if this was supposed to be, I guess you were talking about this with the first issues. For the first couple issues, I didn't feel like I needed to know anything else about. Moon Knight. I thought they did a really
Mm,
fun and a good job at efficiently recapping the story in the very beginning and even making it kind of fun the way they phrase it of like, or so he thinks, you know. So I felt fine jumping right into this, you know, new run of Moon Knight. But then in the later episode, the later issue of issue 6, I want to say, when we did start to get more of this, you know, cab driver character, and they acted like this character had been around the whole time, I'm like, what is happening? Like, this is
right.
not, you know, this has not been set up in the issues that we have been reading. So that all felt to me odd, and then all this space stuff was just weird. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Space Wolves and how that cribs from. Again, there's another like Warhammer thing, and everybody borrows from everybody, and they may not even know it. But Space Wolves is a whole army, and you know Warhammer 40K. Not that it's that original, put space and wolves together, right? But anyway, it's just odd to me where this goes.
Well,
But
it's
before we get
certainly
into,
odd,
yeah,
but let me
yeah,
say then again, in
no, no.
comics,
Hmm.
continuity is important, and you gotta like kind of also go, okay,
Hmm.
there are things about continuity that I don't know, but that
Okay.
I'm going to just flow with for a bit
Okay.
because
Sure.
Jake Lockley or whatever is a
Yeah.
well-established third personality of Moon Knight in the comics
Okay.
for decades. The
Gotcha.
wolf thing, I think, is about Moon Knight's first appearance was in a comic called Werewolf by Night, which I think
Okay, so
Marvel
they got another
Television
one.
is also going to
Hmm.
do a Werewolf by Night thing for Halloween this year, I think. So
That'd be
they're
fun.
mining like everything. I mean, they're really taking,
I'm up for werewolves,
as this
please.
comic says, the bottom of the barrel type third string
Yeah.
characters.
It felt
And
very meta. I was
yeah,
commenting
there's
on
a lot of
itself.
meta going on.
Uh,
But so like those
yeah.
things I'm on
Mhm.
board with. I mean, I think more so than where the comic has been so far. I do love this artist. I think this artist is amazing. But like when we go here,
Which artist were you living?
oh, the first artist for
The
the
original. Yeah, yeah.
first few
The
issues.
way the original artist does crocodile heads, like
Oh,
I know that sounds so
all right.
specific, but just the shading and everything, like it looks. Maybe it's because I grew up in
Such good
Florida, you know. So
shading.
I'm because well, no, I mean seriously, like if you can go back and look, even when the cop turns into another crocodile-headed person, like they all look really good. So part of me was still rolling with and enjoying the story because of that artist. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
Like, yeah, I want to see this artist draw cool Egyptian things. Sure. But then once they were gone, I think that made me kind of realize some of the stuff you had been saying about sort of the weakness of the storytelling. I think that sort of put it a little in perspective. But I think also the end of the issue right before this was so unsatisfying. But we can get to that.
mm.
Sorry, after this. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So anyway, we get these new artists.
Mhm.
This guy right here,
I do like that
I
shot, by the way.
I love this artist just all around. This is a guy named
Yeah.
James Stoko,
Okay.
and he's nuts. He's like the stuff he draws. This is actually pretty toned down, which makes me
I
think
can
like
believe that
it.
from him.
It
Yeah.
makes me think maybe this was a bit of a deadline crunch type
Mhm.
situation. Of course, he only has to do like 3 pages or something in this, but he has
Right.
done just some of like the wildest comics. And Jeff, you would just love his choices. He mainly does his own stuff. His
Okay.
series he's doing right now for Dark Horse, I think, is a straight up like um, old style kung fu um, sort of
It's
type
neat.
story with
Sure. Sure.
very much like the girl has to go on a quest, defeat the 7 evil monsters
Well,
of the whatever, like
I
your
mean,
whole
I'm down for
jam.
that.
And it's
Yeah.
really gross and like goofy and
Hmm.
funny and weird. He did, I think, the best Godzilla comic series that exists
Okay.
called
Okay.
Half Century War, and he just draws the hell out of Godzilla and just
I could see that. Maybe. Yeah.
all of Godzilla's enemies, which all just look completely insane.
Uh-huh.
And it's amazing. He made a really great Aliens series for Dark Horse too. He's
Okay.
done another thing called Orc Stain, was like the
Hmm.
first series he came out with. I adore this guy, is basically what I'm saying. So I was like really super surprised and super happy to see him in here. And
It's
did
so weird.
and to go
Yeah.
like, okay, the thing with the artist, matching up the artist with the writer, I
Sure.
feel like Jeff Lemire was like, James, what do you want to draw? And he's like, I want to draw like a Voltron, like
Werewolves in space.
space werewolves thing. Like, this is his brain. This is James Stoko's brain. This is not Jeff
Okay.
Lemire's brain. Like, he was like, okay, make it loosely connected to Moon Knight. What do you want to do? And he's like, this is what I want to do. And he's like,
It's on
cool,
a moon.
let's go. It's on
Oh
a
my God.
moon. So I am in love with this. This is my favorite thing
Oh,
about the comic.
oh my
Um,
goodness. I
these
feel like
these other ones
I
I'm
could
not as into. I mean, this is the
I could get why you say it, but like from a storytelling perspective,
well,
it
why
just
not go this
doesn't.
crazy? If you're gonna go crazy, go
Uh,
crazy. You know that in
I
itself
guess.
is, and
I
we can get some
guess.
of his other pages, but it's
I
just,
suppose.
yeah, it's
I
fun.
mean,
It's I have more
the
energy here than in any other part of it. It doesn't make any
I,
sense, but
I'll agree. Like, listen,
come on,
I
look
went
at these
back and looked at these
wolves.
shots again. Listen, I looked at the shots again because he does really good movement for sure. Like, listen, I
Uh,
will totally agree. I lingered on these pages
yeah.
because the earth, gorgeous in that wide shot.
Uh,
Like that wide shot
let's get
is
to some of his other stuff.
beautiful. And then the way the fur is sort of attached to the wolves, but their butts are still like out. Like it was just neat. So yeah, no, it was really cool. But the original artist to me is just I don't know. It's so like it's not super gritty, but it feels real. I don't know. I just really liked the original artist, so I think maybe I was
Yeah.
tied to that. But I hear you that insert is just sort of craziness and it brings this energy. Sure, sure, why not? I know
Yeah.
you're looking for more of his
I'm looking for
more of his
more of
drawings.
his where we get the
You're like there's
spaceships
got to
over
be
the.
there's
Oh
more
yeah, yeah,
spaceships
no, no,
at the
I
end.
remember. Yeah, here we
Well,
go. We
there it
get more
is.
of
But
these
his faces
mechs.
are so like tilted. Like I'm just reading something completely different. I'm like, okay, and like the way he looks around, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right, right. And
Like
so that
that's
style, oh, I love that style. I
I
love it.
don't get me
That's
wrong, I
very
like that
manga,
style.
man. That's super
No, no, no.
manga.
I like the style. It just didn't work for me as part of this. Like it
Ah,
didn't feel again, it just felt like somebody telling another random story that they want to tell. It did not feel like, oh, this is his different personality. I really
why
feel like
not?
this is someone being like, oh, we've got this great artist. Yeah, like you said, what do you want to draw? Just draw whatever. And it just doesn't feel connected in any way
Well, none
to
of
the
this
story or the
does
character.
though. That's the thing. Like this story, I like those parts the best because
It
they're fun to
should
look
though.
at. Well,
Right, they're fun to look
but
at.
I'm talking about this comparatively. I agree
Okay.
that like it
Okay.
doesn't have
Sure.
anything to do with anything, but nothing has anything
Gotcha.
to do with anything in this. Like so like
That's
yeah,
what's
I would much
bad.
rather hit this.
Just,
Now I'm happy. Now I'm
well, I
pleased.
mean, yeah.
Whereas like this, I'm like, what is I don't
No, for
if that
sure,
makes
for sure.
sense.
No,
Um,
I do. If we're not caring about the story, yeah, we're just saying what's
what even
fun
is the
that's left
story
over
here
in the
at this
comic.
point?
Exactly. That's the problem.
It's
Is
kind of
this
like
it
an
just
it's
this what it means it imploded. It imploded in the previous episode when
issue.
there's another Moon Knight and the other Moon Knight is really Khonshu and it's been him that's flooding New York this whole time and like
Hmm.
nothing we've been built up makes any sort of sense. And
Yeah.
that's the moment that I would like close the comic and I would go never again. Like, that just feels like
Yeah.
a betrayal to your readership that you just had no idea what to do, so you made it all a lie. And it doesn't make sense why it would be made all a lie. Like I'm down for the twist with some logic behind them, but there was just nothing. And then we get to the shot of like him waking up and he's a executive producer or whatever. And then now we're into this in the beginning of this episode, the
And
beginning of this issue.
and again, I
So
think it goes back to like how much time are you gonna give, Jeff Lemire here to make this make sense? How much do you trust it's gonna pull together into something that like just
yeah.
clicks in this amazing way? And I just don't give it any trust, even if it clicked in some. Here's the thing: I think too many comics are worried about being clever and that they're
Okay, I'd
mainly
agree with.
concerned
Sure.
about being clever. And this is not how comics ever used to be. through most of
Hmm.
their history. They were not about being super clever. But then you had, guys like Alan Moore and Grant Morrison come along and be like hugely influential to everybody who
Sure.
came after them. And those dudes are relentlessly clever. Like they're just too clever. They're like everything, every idea, everything. You're like, how did these two crazy Brit and crazy Scottish dude come up with all these ideas? They're amazing. And like
Hmm.
everybody else wants to do that. But the thing about both of them, both Alan
Hmm.
Moore and Grant Morrison, is that they give you an emotional hook every time. And that's what I
Hmm.
feel like. This is me getting up on a soapbox now, but I feel like this next generation of writers
Okay.
don't give you that. They're like, ooh, look at how clever I'm being. Y'all are going to be
Mm.
wowed about how clever
Right.
I'm being. And sure, when it gets meta and he starts, this like really is a Marvel movie that they're
Right.
making, and like, oh, it's a
Yeah,
second tier character.
I feel like it was beating me over the head with it. It was
Yeah.
like, well, even when they were like, it lost all subtlety, and I'm like, yes,
You're right,
yes,
all
you
right,
did,
all right,
right?
all right.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And it's
it
kind
was
of too
just,
bad because even like this artist, like I'm kind of into. I mean, this is a really
yeah, I mean,
striking image, and I like
it
what he's
is.
doing with the colors. So I would be on
I
board
agree. I
with like
agree.
another sort of story, or being in this artist's perspective.
I agree. It's
Um,
it's not bad. Like, when I said that the art went down, I was mainly thinking of this artist. Some of these shots to me
yeah,
were just like not that great.
yeah,
But because you're right, like the other two art styles, they've got this compelling edge to
mm-hmm,
them,
yeah.
for sure. I mean, again, I really, really like the original artist, so it's tough for me. But yeah, I agree with the cleverness. I think they tried to go clever and it just failed. And that's a shame, right? Because if you don't have the emotional hook and you get a face plan on story plot not working, what are you left with, right? Like you're left with the arts, which is the good images, but then you change artists. It's like what
You're left with
remains. So
every like 10 pages or so, you get 3 pages of Space Wolves, which is what
exactly,
I'm
right.
holding
So
on to right
I
now.
guess. And the part that's a shame to me is I can see why people would really like Moon Knight because I do even in this issue I like what they're saying. I like the idea of using a character explore mental illness and the idea of multiple personality dissociative, what was it,
Identity
disorder,
disorder,
did
DID.
identity disorder, right? DID. Like I like what they're doing, that are just being more aware of various mental issues that can happen. I think that's cool and neat. um but it just felt like they missed the mark with this, which was unfortunate to me. So what I do think is neat overall, despite what we've recently said about, the newest episodes of Moon Knight, or at least what I've said, is that I think this still stands as a clear testament of, if anyone is ever going, when is an adaptation better than the source material? I do think Moon Knight does stand as like the story that they are choosing to tell is the awesome part of Moon Knight, which is, let's have a character who's got multiple personalities and has to deal with the emotional ramifications of that and like interactions with other people because of that.
Mm.
And let's do a story where like there are these Egyptian gods who are, walking around, who have avatars. I wish they were doing more with that personally, but they are exploring that in, the show. And I just feel that they've chosen the best elements of Moon Knight to, get across and focus on, and that's really cool.
Okay, well, here's what's going to happen. We're
Mhm.
going to continue with both these stories
Oh no.
now that they've both
No.
gone off the rails, and see, can they pull them
No.
back? Can they pull
Oh
them back?
no.
And if anybody is a fan of this Moon Knight
No.
run, please, yell at us. I'm going to make you keep reading,
Yeah,
Jeff. You don't have to read as
tell me
many.
it's great.
Read
Tell me
like,
it's great.
read two or
Well, there's
three
only
more.
there's only 12 issues, I suppose, and it's not like they
Yeah.
take that long to read. It's
Yeah,
just
and
like, yeah,
it'll be an interesting compare and contrast of the two now that they've
sure.
both gone totally insane.
I will agree. I will completely agree that they've both gone so insane. Um, oh yeah, the issue 5 though, man, it's just why? Like, why would you make Moon Knight Khonshu who then just wants your body? Like, it's just why? Why would you do that? But anyway,
I'm
yeah.
sure
Well,
it all comes together like an amazing puzzle, Jeff, and it's gonna
it's I
blow your
no,
mind.
I Here's my prediction for the comic. I don't think they're ever going to touch that again. I feel like they're like
Hmm.
maybe not even going to go back to that for a while. Like, sure, we're going to get Khonshu eventually, but in terms of Seth like trying to take over and Seth has been captured, I mean, I guess maybe they'll go back to that. But you're right. The two stories are in a very, very similar place, where both of them reach sort of like a climax that we're then on this like trippy side quest for. So I suppose it is appropriate to keep them both going.
All
So
right, and we will do
there it
that
is.
next week. I'm excited to see
Mhm.
what's going to happen with the talking hippo, and we will
Talking
weigh
Hippo.
in.
Right. Oh, and since I complained again, well, I was going to give a different recommendation, but since I talked about it this time, I do recommend the anime that I talked about if anyone wants to check that out. So there it is.
All right, camera went crazy again, but I'm not changing it. Bye, everybody. We will see you
Who
next time.
cares? See you next time.